This is pretty cool for me because this is the first time I've spoken to a group in 2 years.
Yeah.
So I realized last week, this is the first, this is the longest I've gone without speaking to a group in real life since 1999. It's weird for me because I started speaking in 99. Yeah, this is really strange. I did a world tour in 2018. I hit about 19 different cities all over the world. In 2019, I did, 2 workshops like this for the public, and I did 2 private workshops in my other businesses. And I did I spoke at 1 or 2 conventions, and then since then, nothing. I mean, 2020, nothing. 2021, nothing. Thanks for that. It's nice. It feels weird. Even though, this is like my life. Lived my life for 20 years. My daughter was born in 1998. God damn, that's a long time. I'm going to start off with this topic, and I promised that I would give you stuff today that you have not seen before. This is something I've never talked about before. I've never shared. I've never discussed this. I've mentioned bits and pieces of this, but I've not talked about any coaching programs on YouTube. This is new for you guys. So I got to make sure I do this correctly. So I'm going to write out the decades. Let's see, I got to measure this just right. So this is 2020s. Remember that? 20. So 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, aughts, teens. 20. I didn't quite do that right. That's close. God damn it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I've done my job, by the time I'm done, I'm going to help you rethink how you view today's dating market. Because there's a lot of confusion about this on the internet, and I have a very different take on this. Some of this stuff, a lot of the stuff you hear on the internet starts from a basis of truth. It's right. A guy will start talking about the problem and I'll say, yes, that's right. And he'll start analyzing the problem, where things are and why things are problematic. But when they keep talking, they go off a cliff. It's like, no! So I'm going to try to give you a different way of viewing this. This is the way I viewed this, and this is a trend that's getting better over time. So, and because this is new, I'm going to do something I never do. Refer to my notes. Usually I never refer to notes, but because this is new, I'll make sure I don't miss anything. Hang on a second. Okay. And if I go too fast, let me know. When I'm out of practice speaking publicly, I speak too fast. So if I go too fast, I get killed. You're talking too fast, bro. 1960s. So prior to the 1960s, and you've heard this 10,000 times, prior to the 1960s, we lived in a regulated sexual marketplace, right? So prior to the 1960s, not literally, but effectively, what happened between the age of 16 and 22 is that society handed you a woman and said, here's your wife, here you go. Not literal, but basically. You didn't have to try very hard. She was just kind of provided for you. Now, she wasn't very hot. She may not have been very cool, but she'd have sex with you, and she'd marry you, and she'd have your kids, and the divorce rate back then was less than 7%, so she'd put up with your shit and not divorce you. All right? So then the sexual revolution of the 1960s happened, and I've written about that in my books, and everything changed, and all of a sudden, as of the mid-1960s, for the first time in modern history, men had to go out into the marketplace themselves and go get their own women, which was new for the modern era. It's never happened before, starting here. Started about, I always match it to Star Trek. Star Trek 1966, if you read, there's these crazy books about Star Trek, the making of Star Trek. Everyone was fucking everybody. It was hilarious, and I said it was great. It was hilarious. So anyway, that started here in the 60s. So, going forward, what's that?
Even Mr. Spock?
Oh yeah, even Mr. Spock. He probably got more than anybody.
Years.
Now, there's 2 types of guys that we're going to focus on through the next several decades, okay? I'm not going to call them alphas and betas because I don't want to muddy the conversation. If you've seen some of the conversations online about Will Smith last week, there's a lot of differing opinions about what is an alpha, what is a beta, so I'm not going to go there right now. I'm going to call them cool guys and average guys, okay? So the cool guys are the guys who get all the girls. Okay? The higher upper echelon, not just good looking guys who are like ripped 6-pack abs, hundreds of millions of dollars, strong game, and throughout the decades, since the 1960s, we've had different names for them. So today we call them Chads, right? In my day back in the 80s, when Andrew and I were hanging out, That was, we called them studs, right? 1960s, they called them He-Man. So that 80s show, He-Man, was actually not from the 80s. That term was from the 50s, called, eat this sandwich and it'll be a He-Man. So we always had names for these guys. They've always been around. There's nothing new. Just the names have changed for them, okay? So if you have an axis here of attractiveness, how attractive the man is to a woman, okay? So this is time, this is attractiveness. You have the cool guys, I'm just calling them cool guys, okay? Chads, whatever you want to call them, okay? On a scale of 1 to 10, these guys are really up top. They're way up here, right? And they've been up here for, let me see, make sure I get my lines right. That's a 9. See, my wife was right about my handwriting. They've been pretty cool, more or less, forever. It's not like they've gone down or up over time. Now, I would argue, this is just my opinion, okay? I would argue that over time, it's actually gone down a little bit. This is my opinion, this is debatable. I think the 1960s Sean Connery James Bond was way cool, not way cooler, but cooler than Dan Bilzerian. Okay, that's my opinion. I think it's Dan, okay? But that's just my opinion. You know, the 1960s Captain Kirk, pretty fucking cool. As compared to like, you know, Vin Diesel, or who's a cool guy now? Who's a really cool guy who's gorgeous and wealthy, and, you know, George Clooney, he's pretty cool. But I would say, this is my opinion, the cool guys from the 60s, a little cooler than it. So a little cooler today. So I would say this line's gone down a little bit. But again, I don't want to muddy the conversation and get into that, because you could argue with me and debate that. So I'm just going to say that they've been cool forever. At a bare minimum, it hasn't gone up. And the number of these men haven't gone up. They've been around since the 60s, even before the 60s. Now, they were around before the 60s, but it didn't matter because everyone was handed a woman. Right? You with me so far? Okay. Check my notes, make sure I don't forget anything. It's weird to check notes. I never do this. Okay. So now we have the average guy. Okay? This is not a loser, this is not a pussy, this is not a beta male necessarily. It could be. This is the typical average guy for the era. So if you actually average out the type of guy you've got, this is the average guy. So this would be the literal average, okay? Nothing unusual, but nothing unusually good or bad. Whatever the average was for the guy at that time, okay? Now, I'm gonna start the 60s, that's when it started to matter. When you had, back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the average guy was about here. In other words, the average guy prior to the early 90s or so was pretty cool. So you guys are old fuckers like me, older guys, you guys can remember this back in these eras. The average typical guy was not bad. He had decent testosterone, he wasn't fat, he knew kind of how to dress, he had some game, a little, he had some game. He wasn't a PUA or pickup artist. He wasn't an alpha male, he wasn't a cool guy, but he had some, in other words, back in the 80s when I went to high school, I don't know if you guys remember, you older guys, but if you were in the 70s or 80s, what have you. You know, if you had an average guy, not a loser, not a cool guy, not the jock, the average guy, if there was a really pretty girl, the average guy could talk to a pretty girl. And it wouldn't be weird, he would know how to do that. He may not have sex with a pretty girl, but he knew how to do it. So in other words, the disparity between the average guy and the cool guy who got all the girls wasn't that large. And again, if you're really young watching this, if you were born after the 90s or the aughts, this will be very confusing for you because something changed in the 90s, I'll get to that in a second. But if you guys are my age or older, you kind of remember the 80s, the 70s, the average guy was pretty good, not bad. So, let me make sure I get this right. When you were existing in the dating marketplace prior to the early 90s, so between the 60s and the early 90s, when you wanted to have sex with a really hot chick in your social circle, I don't mean someone famous, I don't mean, you know, Farrah Fawcett in the 70s, okay? I don't mean that. I'm talking about the girl who was an 8 or a 9 or a 10 in your circle, in your school, in your neighborhood, at the club you were at, right? Was your competition the best looking guy in school? Was your competition a guy who was Sean Connery, who'd walk in with six-pack abs and hundreds of millions of dollars to take your girl? Was that your direct competition? No, this guy was not your competition. You didn't even live in that world, most of you. I mean, I don't think any of you did. I certainly fucking didn't. Are you kidding? So when you wanted to get laid with someone who was hot, I don't mean average girls, I mean, you know, good-looking pretty girls in this zone right here, who was your competition back then?
They're average guys.
The average guy. The competition you had back then was your buddies. And again, I grew up in the 80s. I remember this. I don't know if you guys had the experience who were my age or older. You have all these buddies, and they're average like you. You're an average guy, they're an average, but they're kind of cool, okay? So what would happen is, this happened to me several times. You'd meet a really hot girl and go, oh, I want to hook up with her. I want to go out with her. And then you waited a few days, and then one of your buddies would start dating you. You're like,
yeah.
Fuck! Right? It's not like the jock, the hottest guy in school came and took your girl. Your fucking friends did. So your competition wasn't the Chad. It just wasn't. It was your buddies. It was your 7 or 8 average normal guys who were kind of cool. Make sense? Very different than today. I'll get to that in a second. So, you guys are my age or older. You tell me, prior to the 80s, 70s, 60s, if you were allowed back in, was there a lot of conversation with average guys back then about, oh, the Chads are getting all the girls. I can't get laid. This is bullshit. No, we didn't have that conversation. That conversation didn't start until many decades later, which I'll cover in a second. Think about that for a minute. We didn't. That conversation didn't exist back then. Now, we did have conversations about things like, you're in high school, right? You're in high school. I was in high school between 86 and 90, right? So we did have conversations about the hottest guy in school would get the hottest girl in school. That is true. We'd have that. But it's not like the super hot girl in our classroom, the super hot girl we go in the club with, the super hot girl we met at the grocery store, the 8 or 9 or 10. Not only the hot girl, it's not like she would be swooped out by someone else, other than you or someone at your level. With me so far?
Yeah.
Now there were some guys back then who did complain about this. I can't get all the hot guys, get all the girls. Okay? These were the loser guys.
Yeah.
We called them in the 80s, we called them nerds.
Yeah.
Okay? Right? Today nerd is not a negative. But back in the 80s, you called her nerd if you wanted to call her nerd.
Yeah.
Right? Today nerd is the norm. Back in the 80s when I grew up, you didn't want to be called a nerd. That was bad news. And it can be different nerds. So like in the 90s they called them burnouts. In the 60s or 70s, they called them beatniks. Maybe not. We have different, again, just like with the Chads, we have different names for these guys over the era, but they always existed. But these guys down here, were they the average? No, they were the exception. So this was like 1 or 2 guys in your classroom if you went to high school. Right? It wasn't the norm. These were the really nerdy, geeky guys in the 80s were unusual. They were the rare exception. So these guys would complain about these guys. So the 80s, when I grew up, you had these crazy movies like Revenge of the Nerds and Animal House, great movies. But those were about this, the perception of this guy looking at this guy. Yeah. Had nothing to do with the average guy. That's why they were so fun. They're great movies. They're a little older now, but they're a little dated. But they're great. That's where this came from. So the only guys who were complaining about, I can't get laid, guys, football players, it's these guys down here, which was a small percentage of the dating marketplace. And again, you weren't competing with them. You didn't pay attention to them. Maybe you're friends with them. I hung out with a lot of nerds because they were funny. But anyway. Make sense so far? Yeah. Okay. My phone just turned off. I want to make sure I cover everything. It's weird for the notes. Okay. You will notice that I stopped this line around the early 1990s. Just like in the 60s when everything changed, something happened in the 90s. And future historians are going to be very excited to discuss the things that happened in the 90s that is not being really discussed right now. Because most of us lived through it or were born in it. I talk in my books how, irrelevant to this, but just an example of how everything changed in the 90s. 2 things went away in the 90s. Lifetime employment and lifetime marriage. They vanished from the Western world. You could rely on that stuff. So before the 90s, you could get a job and stay there for the rest of your life. You get a gold watch and have a pension when you retired. It was all good stuff. Right? In the 90s, if you got married, in the 80s it spiked, well let's see, late 70s spiked up a little bit, but prior to like the divorce rate was somewhere around 40-50%, right? And before that it was smaller. So in the 90s, this is when it really skyrocketed, right? So because of various other factors, environmental factors and societal factors, and factors you and I could sit there and bitch and moan about all day, which we're not going to do, what happened to the average guy in terms of attractiveness to women? Well, it did this. Okay, so now we're in the 2020s. Every decade it's gotten worse. It will continue to get worse. I've talked about this. All the red pill guys have talked about this. We give all the reasons for it. So now we're here. So now what's happened? Now the disparity, now this is not a loser. This is the average guy now. The average guy, you may have seen these guys on YouTube, these young guys in their 20s, these YouTube guys, and they, for fun, they go get their testosterone checked, and it's like 220 total testosterone. Guys in their 20s?
Yeah.
And it's like 3 guys in a YouTube show, 3 guys, all in their 20s. They all, it's not like 2 guys were at 1,000, 1 guy's at 2, the weirdos at 2. No, all 3 of them are at like 220, 190. This is now the norm. These aren't losers anymore, this is the norm. This is the average guy. More pussified, more feminine, more beta, more scared, lower T, right? So what has happened now? Unlike back then, what's happened now is the disparity between the Chad and the normal guy. Notice the Chad is still up there, there's no change. And again, I would argue, I don't even drop it. I would argue it's kind of done this. See, the Chad I think is a little lower, a little bit. But look at this disparity. So that's why now you get all these bitching and moaning from normal everyday guys there that I can't get laid. Look at this guy on Instagram. He's getting all the girls. What am I supposed to do? Well, we never had this conversation back there. So that means what for us? There's a reason this makes me happy and it makes everyone else miserable. So, if I talk about Jordan Peterson, if I talk about Rollo, who's my friend, if I talk to a lot of guys I can name, they look at this, they go, oh my God, look how terrible this is so awful, we should go back to the 50s where everything is perfect, this is unacceptable, you're going to have 5% of men fucking 90% of girls, you're going to have all these millions of men in the gutter jerking off because they won't have, it's just how terrible, oh this is so horrible, and they're right in that this will get worse. We've entered into a dark age that has just begun. This is going to get much worse over time. We're just getting started this shit. But the reason this doesn't bother me is my view is society makes its own decisions and I'm not responsible for what society does. I'm responsible for myself and my inner circle. That's my whole concept. If you know my content, you know. Right? But B, here's the better thing. If you are an average guy, if you're a guy in this room, okay, and you want to be successful with women, what do you have to do? Do you have to be a Chad? Do you have to make $200 million? No. Do you gotta get 6-pack abs? No, to be fair, the guys there, it's all about SMV, Caleb. It does help. Of course it helps. If I had 6-pack abs, I would have to spend a little less time in my woman life. That's true. If I had hundreds of millions of dollars, it would help. So yes, that helps. But do you need to get the hot girls? No. Here's the zone of success. The zone of success is right here. All you have to do is get to what I will call 80s average. That's it. All you have to do is get your ass back up to where normal guys were when I was in high school in the 80s. I'm not that old, about turn 50. That's all. All the hot girls, let me focus on this for a minute. Guys will look at this and say, well, the hot girls are up here. The girls out here are all 6s. No. I don't know about you. I've seen women at the grocery store who were 9s. I mean, I've seen it, right? I've seen women at the mall, normal everyday girls, 18 to 32 or whatever, who were 8s, 9s, 10s, who were not supermodels, they were not Instagram models, they were not famous actresses, they're not famous heiresses, right? And they all live here. So here's a question I thought about. Why is it that, because you have this problem, a whole bunch, and there's a lot of conversation about women where women talk to themselves about the dating market, how they can't find any good guys anymore, which is true. They're right. Back then it was a platitude. Today it's true. All these younger girls who are having less sex, I don't know if you guys knew this, so the millennial generation and Gen Z are having much less sex than Gen X, my generation. Far, for the age that they are, far less. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. There's 2 big ones, I'll cover both. The big reason is that men are here. So all these hot young girls have nowhere to go. So, but here's the question. Why is it that, to be fair, why is it that not 100% of all these hot young girls from 18 to 24 are not all going to guys my age, instead of just a percentage? Why is that? Because I'll say here you have no competition, which is true, you don't. There's no competition here. This is a competition-free zone. I operate and have for the last 15 years. I've lived this lifestyle for 15 years now. I have operated in a competition-free zone. It's very rare, Kari and I were talking about this the other day. Very rare that I've had any guy come in and swoop women out from under me. Because I'm not operating here, although I dip my toe into this, I'll talk about it in a second. I'm operating here. Who's my competition? Nobody. No one's here. You guys are here. So some of you are here. Some of you are here. Some of you might be here. Now, to be fair, if you want to get to here, that's fine. If that's your objective, go for it, please. That's fine. That's not bad. Great, that's great. And some of you might have that objective, that's fine. I'm saying you have to. So, I'm gonna address an objection. Well, Caleb, wait a second. Why is it then that you have said that online dating, day game, night game, have gotten more difficult over the past 2 years? Because they have. It's not because of this. It's not because more guys are competing against the same girls. The opposite has occurred. There's less guys competing for the same pool of hot chicks in this zone right here. There's less guys. What are you competing against? Unfortunately, you're competing against this with the young girls, especially the young pretty girls. So I'll give you that example. I'm just covering this to cover all the bases in case I get objections about this. In the 80s, back in my day, when you were a hot girl, but not a supermodel, when you were a 9 or a 10 who wasn't famous, or an 8, and you wanted to get attention from men, what did you have to do? You had to go into the bathroom, do what Pink Firefly's doing right now. Go in the bathroom, spend 3 or 4 hours getting ready, go down to the bar and go talk to guys in real life. That's the only way you could get validation, right? That's how you could do it. Maybe you could call someone on the phone, that wasn't the same. Today, right, and you'll hear a lot of bitching and moaning about this from my fellows in this world, you know, a girl can sit on a toilet, right, and get validation from this.
Yeah.
So you're not competing with men anymore, you're competing with this. True? Okay, but here's my thing. If I have a choice between competing with these guys, because I went through this, I know what this is like. Competing with these guys or competing with this, I'll take this any day. Any day. All the women I've had sex with over the past 15 years, kind of a large list, the vast majority of them were into this. And it still worked. I'd rather compete with this than this. This was hard. You guys are my age or older. You remember, this was hard.
Yeah.
You could do it, but you had to work hard. I don't work that hard. The older I get, the less I have to work. It's kind of nice. Okay. That makes sense so far? I don't go too fast. All right, hang on. Check out my notes, make sure I get all this. So, in terms of not working very hard, I'll give you some examples. I talked to a lot of you. I've talked to thousands of you, so I got a lot of informal data from the marketplace. We did a book, I republished a book, updated a book about 2 years ago called My Ultimate Online Dating Manual, updated for the 2020s. And in that book, we interviewed 12 guys, well, we interviewed more than that, and we vetted these guys. My staff actually vetted them. They had to take video of their computer screen. They couldn't send us screenshots because you could Photoshop them on their success they were getting with women. Out of the 12 guys in that book, let's see, if I'm gonna get this number right, 9 or 10 of them were talking about how easy it was. This is easy. They would say to me, okay, I see all this bitching and moaning on the internet about how it's hard to get laid online. It's easy. Because most guys are where? They're here. These guys were here. It was easy. And only one of these 12 guys was here. There was one guy in LA who was here. All the rest were normal 80s average. They weren't working that hard. They put in some time and effort, yes. But because they had no competition, it was easy. This is how I felt. And I've existed in this zone now for 15 years. I have never tried to be this. Even financially, which is my big part of my life. This woman stuff is a subset of my life. Finances are my big part of my life. My business is, even here. Never had that goal. All right, so let me add another layer to this. How are we doing on time? Pretty good. This next piece is something you layer on top of this. Okay? This comes out of the business world. This is what I'm about to say. I did not make this up. I think Tony Robbins even talked about this, something like that. You have, I won't write this out, I'll show it with my hands. Imagine 2 bar charts, okay? So one bar chart is effort, one bar chart is results. Cool? Okay. On effort, we have several levels. At the very bottom, we have poor. Poor effort, shitty effort, okay? Now if you go way up, you get to good effort. Okay? Then if you go way up again, you have great effort. Okay, so you have these 3 levels. And you have that disparity between each 3. Okay? But over here you have results. So same levels, at the bottom you have poor. Poor results. Okay, shitty results. Way up you got good, way up again you have great. Now here's the trick. The level of effort results in 1 less level for results. So if you get poor effort, you give poor effort, you get 0 results. You don't get poor results, you get no results. Okay? If you give good effort, you get poor results. And this is more true now in our era now than ever before in human history. If you do good effort in life, that means you go to high school, you get straight A's, you go to a good college, and you get good grades, and you get your college degree, and you get a good corporate job, and you marry a good woman, and you have 2.3 kids. That's a good effort. You're going to get fucked if you do that now. You're screwed if you do that now. That was great advice back then, by the way. And I've said this before. If I was an adult in the 1960s, and I had a son who was 17, my son's 30, but if he was 17 in the 60s, I'd say, dude, you're going to college. Go. You're going to college. Because that was great advice back then. Is it good advice now? Unless you want to be a doctor. No. It's not. But one exception would be a doctor, and then you better really want to be a doctor, right? I mean, you better really want to be a doctor. Yeah.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Kids do it.
Well, you got to spend 10 years for you to make any money, right? No more than that. You're scaring me, dude. So, if you want good results, you have to do what? Great effort. Okay? Now, this applies to women, this applies to your financial life, this applies to your business life, this applies to everything, especially again in this modern era. Now, here's the trick. What if you want great results? Because that's my thing. I don't want good results, I want great results. Here's the secret. There's another level above great in terms of effort called exceptional. And it's only this much higher. That's the beauty of it. You go one or two notches higher to be exceptional, now you have great results. So that's where I've lived since about 2018. 2008, 2017? 2018, I said, okay, let's kick this way up. And when I made that decision, starting in 2018, I'll give you a financial example. I had one day where I netted $72,000. That's net in my pocket, that's not gross. I had never done that before. I received checks that large in my consulting practice, but that covers like a project that takes me 3 months. One day, $72,000, once I made the decision to go to exceptional, to get great results. A few months later, I made $242,000 net. This is net profit in a week. Never done that before. All because I just went, and I wasn't working double or triple, I worked a little more. I was a little more focused. That's it, because I was already doing great in terms of effort. I've been doing that, I'm a workaholic. With this stuff too. I worked very hard for this. Back in 2008, 2009. Now today this is on autopilot for me. So if you take those levels and overlay it on top of this, everything becomes less effort because of this. I could make a parallel argument, I'm not going to talk about that today, unless you guys want me to, on Alpha 2.0 business, designing your own business, as long as it's niche and high margin, making that $85,000 a year location dependent or more. Easier now because who do you have for competition in the business world? I mean, when I say that, you have no competition in the business world. Well, Caleb. And they'll bring up either Wall Street or Silicon Valley. Okay, fine. Do you live in Wall Street or Silicon Valley? No. Are you competing against Wall Street or Silicon Valley? No, you're not. I'm not competing against these people. Again, we're talking about here. Make sense? You're not competing at this level unless you really want to. I'll talk about this in a second. That's what I forgot about. This. So it's the same thing with business too. The great and good and exceptional efforts are actually lower now because of this. Instead of saying, oh, this is so terrible, all the chads are banging all the girls and the normal guy can't get laid, or oh, this is terrible, people are losing their jobs and inflation and gas prices. And yeah, gas prices would be a problem if you had a job. I mean, yeah, I understand. I didn't even notice gas prices till Big Firefly pointed them out. I'm like, oh wow, they're $6. I don't even own a car. I don't care, because I don't operate at this level down here in terms of the business world. Okay, let me say something about this then. Why this thing about, those windows. This thing about, I need a drink, hang on. This thing about where guys say, well, all the guys on Instagram, guys who say, I have had a growth of this in the last maybe 2 years. The car you may have had too. Where guys say, I gotta buy a Lamborghini. Right. I gotta get laid, so I gotta buy a Lamborghini. That never happened prior to 2 years ago, because what's happening? We never had these conversations ever. This is a new thing, and like I said, it's gonna get worse. I'm gonna get more of those emails over time. Caleb, I gotta get a private jet. Or I can't get laid. How am I getting a private jet? I can't, therefore I can't get laid. Yeah.
How did you go from great to exceptional effort? What did you, was it like a mental shift, or was it like, did somebody help you with that? Did you have a mentor, you know what I mean? So,
I wonder if I should address that at the end. Can I address that at the end of this? 2 more minutes? Remind me, okay? Because I want to answer that. That's a good question. That's a fantastic question. I'm going to answer that. I'm going to get off topic because that's more business, but I'll talk about that when I'm done with this. A few more minutes. Remind me if I forget. Instagram. Instagram is a world that doesn't exist. Now, that's not exactly true. It does exist, but it's this big. The world is as big as the world. The Instagram world is this big. It's tiny. It's teeny, teeny, tiny. In the last 2 years of my life, since moving out of the country, and I'm in higher income brackets now and things like that, I have dipped my toe into this world. I don't live in this world, I don't want to. But I have dipped my toe in this world. I can tell you for a fact it is a world that doesn't exist. It's a world that is not relevant to your existence, even if all you want are hot girls. If you want a perfect tens, this world doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. If you show a picture of a girl on Instagram, and you go, damn, and there's another girl anywhere in the vicinity, what does the other girl say? You're on Instagram, you see a hot Instagram model, and go, oh my gosh, she's so hot. What does the other girl say? Does anyone know? So you get it right.
She's fake.
She's fake. What else did she say?
Filter.
Filter. That's true. It's accurate. And you know why they filter it? Well, all the other girls are filtering it. Because sometimes I talk to this girl, why do you filter? You're pretty, what the fuck? Well, all the other girls are filtering. I have to filter. I'll look ugly. Here's another thing too. Pink Firefly was just screwing around the other day with filtering out for me. She goes, I'm gonna filter you. I'm like, great, filter me. So she made me look like Tom Cruise, literally. And then it showed the before and after of my, so here's what happened. She showed me a picture we took in Vegas. We were in Vegas last week. And I looked at this picture, I said, I look pretty good. Damn, I'm always surprised when I look good. Hey, I look pretty good. Shit, that's not bad. So then she filtered the fuck out of me, right? She gave me this more chiseled jawline, and she smoothed skin, and she made my eyes a little bigger, and she got rid of the dark circles because I'm in Eastern time right now, and something else, something with my ears. I don't know what the fuck she did. And I look like Tom Cruise. And so she, this app puts us side by side of before and after, and the picture I thought looked really good. I look and I go, oh shit, I'm an ugly fat fuck. But I thought I looked good before she filtered me. That's the world these women live in. Many of you met Pink Firefly. She's gorgeous, but she thinks she's, a 6 because of this world. Yeah.
And one of the really interesting things is there's an app called was it Facetune, I think it is, or
Facetune?
Yeah. Like you do a couple subtle filters on your dating photos, and it like fucking jacks up your attractiveness.
Oh hell yeah!
Fucking roof.
Right.
And it's not even like the really like gross sort of ugly that you were talking about that Pink Firefly.
Just tweaks a little bit.
Just a couple little tweaks and just like jacks up your attractiveness.
We're going to talk about online dating photos and photos of social media in great detail tomorrow. We'll throw them up on the thing if you guys want us to review them. I'm going to go through some, and we're talking about great detail because not only is it about online dating now, it's also about social media. Because a lot of women, I figured this out pretty damn quick. They fucking Google you and they look you up, and all of a sudden all your pictures that you weren't planning on them seeing are now, So we'll talk about that in detail. Yes, correct. I will give you several examples of how this world doesn't exist in terms of your day-to-day life. Okay, I can give you many. I'll give you two off the top of my head. Like I said, I dipped my toe in this world, especially since being in Dubai. Dubai has a lot of this world, but even in Dubai, it's a tiny little world. I was with a woman last year, briefly, and she had these scars on her back. And I glanced at them and I thought they were just scars. I looked at them more carefully and they looked a little more weird. They weren't scars because they were equidistant from each other on her upper back. It's like she had wings and someone tore off her wings. It was right about there. And they were squared off. So they were man-made. So I'm like, what the hell? I've seen boob scars. I've seen all kinds of scars. Never seen this. So I said, hey, what's with the scars? Where are these from? That's how I asked the question. And she said, by the way, back up. She lived in this world. Famous Instagram model, millions of followers. Okay? So she lived in this world. This was her world. She lives in this world. And she answered very nonchalantly, oh, I had several of my ribs removed to make my waist look small.
Oh my God.
Holy shit, it's good.
This world doesn't exist. So let me explain something. Think about this for a minute. If this woman, who was hot, okay, if this woman sat down with a bunch of normal but very hot girls in your normal day-to-day life, she was with 3 or 4 other women her age who were very hot, and she said at the dinner table, I had several of my ribs removed to make my waist look smaller. What would be the reaction of these women? What the, what? Now women are polite because they're, what the fuck? They don't do that like we do. Okay, but they'd be like, what? Aren't you gonna die? Matter of fact, when she told me this, I didn't want to touch her anymore because I could have snapped that shit in half. It would hurt her. Now, I will tell you for a fact, the women who live in this world hang out with other women who live in this world. They're all buddies. And so when she hangs out with her other Instagram billion follower friends, and she says, I had some of my ribs removed to make my waist look smaller, the women there go, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that next summer. What doctors you use? Okay, it's in a completely different world that doesn't apply to anything you do Even if you are a male 10, and even if you are a multimillionaire. I'm a millionaire. I don't live in this world. I don't want to live in this world. Make sense? This world doesn't exist. So next time I get this thought about, oh my God, all these guys, all these chads on Instagram are banging all the... No, that world doesn't exist. You don't need to live in that world. All you need to live in is right here. And I'm going to repeat again. There are lots of hot girls in this world. It's not like this world only has 6s and 5s and 4s. 18 and up are in this world, all over the place. And you have less competition because men are down here. These are the guys online who are bitching about, well, not bitching. Some of them are bitching. These are guys who are smoking weed all day, watching Netflix all day, playing video games all day, fantasizing about doing stuff and never doing it, complaining about black pill and MGTOW. That's the typical guy now. Make sense?